All right, here we are, the next video. Thanks for joining us again. I want to make a quick correction. In the last video I said we'll begin the next turn. What I really meant is begin the next phase, because this is merely the administrative segment, and that's when you conduct commando missions. And you can only conduct them during the first administrative segment of the game, and if you don't do it then, you forego the opportunity for the rest of the game. So let's talk about a couple other things regarding these commando missions. Now, commando missions are special insofar as they can't be intercepted by air units. They're coming in stealthy, theoretically, and all that sort of thing. So they're just kind of an automatic first turn kind of a mission that kind of gets things jump-started. After that, the game system kind of takes on a different tenor, because you've got air units and there's interceptions and there's all sorts of things that go into land combat. So, but anyway, we've accomplished this much, and the Chinese are pretty happy. The next thing the Chinese have to do is they have to decide where they want to land their initial invasion. Now, I mentioned that in a previous game, the Japanese had left this undefended, and so they corrected that error by defending this pretty well. Here we've got the 2nd Mechanized Division with a strength of 16, and that's pretty good. Plus the Japanese player. By the way, that's me. I am the Japanese player and the Chinese player, but I'm going to speak in the third person for sake of clarity. Japanese player has placed a SAM unit here, and those SAMs are pretty powerful, so that's going to scare the Chinese player off. I'm also the Chinese player, as I mentioned. So what to do? Well, I think knowing that the Japanese have really fortified this area, I think we're going to do something daring. It may not be smart, but it's daring. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the Chinese fleet. You can see the Chinese fleets right there. These are the invasion force, and they move amphibiously. They have the capability of moving amphibiously, and that's signified by the fact that they are maroon colored. And these are the Chinese fleets right here, and there are 3 of them. Japanese have fleets as well. They've got 4 of them. But what we're going to do with this Chinese fleet is we're going to sail it way around south of Japan here, and I think we're going to come up here, and maybe we'll hit Shikoku and see how that goes. That's a long and arduous journey, however, and of course naturally, as soon as the Japanese get wind of that, they're going to pick up a bunch of these land units and they're going to start heading them that way. So, but I've got a plan for that, and the plan for that is the Chinese airmobile units. You can see them right here. And what we're going to do with these guys is we're going to kind of emulate what happened on D-Day, where the airborne units tried to seize key locations and junctions and things like that, just to kind of tie the Germans down. So let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll get to the first naval movement of the game. All right, so here we've got an airmobile brigade, a Chinese airmobile brigade, the 127th, and we're going to deploy him right there. And what we're going to do is we want to control the straits here and prevent the Japanese forces from coming up this way. We're also going to put an airmobile unit here, and that's going to serve the same purpose. We might even be able to wipe out this this battalion, and we're going to put an airmobile guy there. Okay, so when you conduct airmobile missions, you have to expend, this is not an option in their case, you have to expend helicopters for the privilege. Now I know these are coded as airborne units if you look at the NATO symbology, but there's not going to be a lot of paradrops going on in the modern era. The helicopter made that mostly unnecessary, except for special circumstances. But so yeah, we've got these helicopters that in theory are choppering in with these airmobile units, and so that's what that's all about. And we simply have to expend the helicopters. Those are gone, and that's all there is to it. There's no die roll. There's no risk involved, really. So what happens is we just simply land the airmobile guys there. The helicopters are gone, and we have secured Shikoku Island. So that's a good start. We've also got these commando units out here, and they're going to run around and cause trouble and try to hold things up. By the way, let's talk about what is the Chinese player's ultimate goal. Well, the victory conditions are contingent upon capturing hexes with a red star. And there's one here. You can see one there. We've already captured one. There's actually 3 here. And that's why these Japanese units are there. By the way, I didn't mention this, but because it didn't come up, but when you conduct a Chinese Special Forces commando mission, if you should do so where a Japanese commando unit is present, that actually will affect the die roll negatively, or I should say against the Chinese. So the Chinese weren't about to try to pull anything up here. And there's a couple other red stars. There may be as many as 3 up in the Tokyo area. So what the Chinese player wants to do is he wants to capture these red stars. Hopefully he can drive up here, capture those red stars, and with any luck he can capture some of the ones in the Tokyo area, although I don't suspect that that's very likely. But the key here is that the bulk of the Japanese army is down on Kyushu, and if I can tie these guys up, and I don't need to defeat them, all I need to do is tie them up. If I can tie them up and make it difficult for them to get up north here, I've got a fair chance of capturing enough of these red stars to win the game. The downside, though, is that I have to make a trip all along this way, and I know there's a Japanese fleet out there. As a matter of fact, there's 4 Japanese naval units, and they're going to come screaming out and try to do something about me. So I've got to be ready for that, and I can expect that I'm going to get harassed all along the journey. Also, there is a rule regarding submarines. Those are represented abstractly. We'll get to that when we begin naval movement. So anyway, okay, there we are. We have completed our air mobile drops, and that went fairly well on the undefended Shikoku Island. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fire some hyperglide vehicles, which is the technical term for these awesome Chinese ballistic missiles. Now, in real life, what these represent are ballistic missiles that the Chinese have converted for anti-ship purposes. Their main reason for existence is to be fired off at American ships that may be coming from the Pacific and encroaching upon Chinese waters. Now, when you look at one of these counters, you've got a triangle symbol. That means that this has a strike capability, and it can strike land units or naval units or other enemy surface-to-surface missile units. They cannot attack air units, and they can't attack cities or anything like that. But they're very effective because this number here, a 5, means that to achieve a hit with your strike, you need to roll a 5 or less. Now, that die roll will be modified by SAM batteries and the fleet's own defenses and things like that, but a 5 is fantastic. Now, when the American fleet shows up, when the 7th Fleet starts making its appearance, and that won't happen until about turn 4, the Chinese player can fire these off at the American fleet. If you'll notice the white hexagon symbol with the U printed in it, that means its range is unlimited. If we slew over this way, you can see we've got a Japanese surface-to-surface missile. It has a range of 3 hexes, and the naval unit's anti-ship missile has a range of 1 hex. So these hyperglide vehicles are really cool for that purpose. Now, these are extremely effective game pieces. There is something that the US player can do about them, though, and that is to actually shoot down the Chinese satellites that guide these things onto their targets. You can see one right there. So, but we'll get into that later. Right now, we're just going to worry about shooting these things off, and I'm going to target the Japanese Navy with 4 of these things, and we'll see how that goes in the next video.